Good evening. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's special edition of the Healing Perspectives Lecture Series brought to you by the Institute for Health and Healing. My name is Dr. Akhil Palanisamy, and I'm a physician at Sutter's Institute for Health and Healing in Sacramento, and I'll be your moderator. A recording of the presentation will be available for replay on our YouTube channel after the event. The link is included in the chat below, and we'll also email you the link within the next week. So before we get started, I want to go over some quick housekeeping to prepare you for our insightful discussion. So today's lecture is for informational purposes only. Everyone's situation is unique, and we ask that you seek out professional advice for your own specific medical needs. Next, we'll quickly review how to use the functions in Zoom to ask questions and get technical support from our team. This will be an interactive lecture. You will not be on camera, but we do encourage you to participate. The chat is currently disabled and will be turned on when our speaker asks questions for you to respond to. See the chat icon on the bottom bar of your screen. Next, if you have questions for the speaker or for our team, click the Q&A icon to type your questions. We have a team monitoring your questions, and we'll try to respond to as many of them as time allows at the end of the presentation. Please note your responses are only visible to our team for HIPAA compliance. Remember, you can access a recording of this talk after the event. Many people learn best by watching and listening to our talks first, and then returning to the recording later to take notes. To thank you for being here today, we'll also send you a post-event email on Friday with a list of resources and this slide deck that you can download. Finally, at the end of today's talk, please share your feedback by taking our short survey. Next, we recommend you adjust the view of the slide and presenter by moving the slider. You can pull it to the left so you have a split screen between me and the slide. If you're having a hard time hearing or seeing anything during the talk, please refresh your screen, check your internet settings or connection, and if you need more help, use the Q&A icon and our team will help you troubleshoot. So now that we've covered the housekeeping items, I want to share more about the Institute for Health and Healing. We offer integrative medicine clinical care that combines the best of conventional medicine with proven healing practices from around the world that serve the whole person. We have integrative medical clinics located in San Francisco, San Carlos, Santa Rosa, Roseville, and Sacramento that offer the services listed here. Many of our services are covered by insurance. The Institute for Health and Healing hosts free Healing Perspectives events several times a year, but today is our premier event of the year. In addition to a lecture, Nipun Mehta will receive the Deep Medicine Award after the Q&A session. It promises to be a really touching ceremony, so I hope you will stay till the end of the show. Before I introduce Nipun Mehta, we're going to take a moment to celebrate the founding medical director of the Institute for Health and Healing, Dr. William B. Stewart, who is now retired. The award that Nipun will receive is named after Dr. Stewart's book, Deep Medicine. Nipun is actually the 20th recipient of this esteemed award, which over the years has been given to luminaries in the field of integrative medicine, including Drs. Andrew Weil, Deepak Chopra, Govindappa Venkataswamy, along with Angeles Arian, and a host of other renowned authors, scholars, activists, and leaders. Dr. Bill Stewart's vision for whole-person healthcare goes beyond the physical and mental aspects of health to address the emotional, spiritual, social, and environmental dimensions. To give you a brief glimpse into Dr. Stewart's impact on all of us, we're going to share a short video that was assembled from video footage and photographs.
Dr. William B. Stewart, founding medical director of the Institute for Health and Healing, started exploring holistic approaches in 1983. His search led to the creation of an integrative medicine clinic located in San Francisco at California Pacific Medical Center, the first to be certified by the state of California. Today, the mission remains unchanged, healing people and transforming healthcare. We are fortunate to have Dr. Stewart explaining our philosophy of care in his own words.
Good medicine is doing what best serves our patients. It's not just a dynamic tension between conventional and complementary medicine, but rather the use of the full spectrum of healthcare, from self-care to spiritual care. By integrating and including the knowledge and wisdoms from many practices, we are doing nothing less than participating in the evolution of contemporary medicine.
The Institute for Health and Healing is here to support patients and their families and the health professionals that care for them. It's here to complement their conventional medical care.
We create an environment with room for science, with room for spirit, with room for our personal journeys and the very mystery of our existence.
Okay, now it is my great privilege to introduce today's speaker, Nipun Mehta from ServiceSpace. So ServiceSpace is built on the belief that people are inherently generous and that positive community and small acts of service create meaningful change in the world. ServiceSpace is an umbrella organization and a technical enabler of more than a dozen major projects. With 1.5 million members, I think it's fair to say that ServiceSpace is making a real difference in communities all around the world. We'll discuss more of Nipun's work at the award ceremony after the talk, so let's go ahead and get the presentation started. Now it's my honor to welcome Nipun Mehta.
Thank you, Akil, and thank you all for standing for holistic health. I'm delighted to be here. I think today what I want to speak about is this holistic approach to health that includes not just the body, but also the mind and even the heart. I think when the body experiences pain and the mind experiences confusion, the heart experiences disconnection. And there's a way that we can move from that pain to resilience, from that confusion to curiosity, and from that disconnection to compassion in a way that's a virtuous circle and brings it all together. But before I do that, I feel like I need to share a bit of my personal presence of where I'm at. Just a couple hours ago, my brother got a bone marrow transplant after 9 years of a struggle being quarantined, and it's this incredible process that he's going through. He's going to get an entire new blood type. We're curious if he's going to stay bald or not. And it's essentially his body's like the marrow underneath the blood is like a newborn baby. And it's going to be a long recovery process. And yet at the same time, it just gives you so many opportunities to be grateful. So I wanted to start with his photo. I wanted to just share his photo here with you. This is after 9 years. He was able to hug my parents. This is a little bit ago when my parents were quarantined. It's just incredible to see that sort of healing process, that healing journey. And one of the things, sometimes when you're going through such a process, sometimes, grace just kind of falls upon you in those unexpected moments. It's like when you're looking at a leaf and all of a sudden you realize, wow, there's a dewdrop on it. And isn't that the miracle of life? So in one of those moments, I was sitting there and I was just reflecting on how my brother over the last 9 years, has needed more and more transfusions, blood transfusions. And up until recently, it felt like it was almost daily, sometimes multiple in a day. And all that blood was donated by strangers, by the kindness and the generosity of strangers. And you will never be able to say thank you back. But it is incumbent on you to then do your best to try to pay it forward. And we are all, in so many ways, recipients of that kind of grace. There was recently, my sister-in-law was telling me about this remarkable author named Suleika Jaoud, who is the wife of John Baptiste. She went through a bone marrow transplant at the age of 22, a grueling process, and then again at the age of 32. And she writes in her book that the tangling of so much cruelty and beauty has made my life a strange, discordant landscape. It has left me with an awareness that haunts the edges of my vision, that it can all be lost in a moment. But it's also given me a jeweler's eye. A jeweler's eye, I really like that. I mean, she's saying, and she says that for all the suffering she's been through, she wouldn't take it away. She wouldn't take even a tiny bit away because it has landed her at the doorsteps of cultivating these jewelers' eyes. And so I think what I want to reflect on today is how do we create those inner and outer conditions where we can cultivate that jeweler's eyes, be grateful for the gifts that are coming our way, and regenerate them to not only find connection ourselves, but for support other people in that process as well. And like I opened, I think where the mind, the body, what the body experiences as pain, the mind really experiences as confusion, and the heart experiences as disconnection. And all of these can be a very vicious cycle. So the pain in the body leads to extra confusion in the mind, which then leads to disconnection in the heart, which then, only propagates the cycle further and further. But can we turn this around into a virtuous cycle where, the pain is elevated to resilience, the confusion opens up into a sense of curiosity, and our sense of disconnection can actually open our hearts into compassion. And if we do that, then there's also this virtuous cycle that starts to take hold of ourselves. And that's, I think, that's the possibility when we start to look at holistic healthcare. Well, I think this is the real possibility. So for the last 25 years, as some of you might know, ServiceSpace has been doing a lot of different experiments to ask this kind of a fundamental question, not just individually, but also collectively, and also seeing how collective affects the individual and individual affects the collective. That, if you're in a healthcare system where the doctors are mandated to see a patient for 6 minutes, and then they have to move on, then 70% of the time they might end up cutting off the patient, and that's not going to be fulfilling for the doctor or the patient. And so how do we change, for personal fulfillment is connected to systemic rules as well, and vice versa. The systems also reflect the internal. And so we've been wrestling with this for a while. And what I would say is that after 25 years of, so many experiments in so many directions, the fork in the road is this distinction between transaction and relationship. So how do we start to move from transaction? Is this idea that it's a very narrow, one-dimensional kind of relationship and interaction where I do this for you, what do I get in return? And a relationship, on the other hand, is much more multidimensional. It's like many parts of me are engaging with many parts of you. And maybe some parts don't get along, but if I can be balanced with it, I actually get the benefit of these so many other parts of you and so many other parts of me that can get along, and that can create a regenerative cycle. So we have designed society in this expression of direct reciprocity, right? This is tit for tat, quid pro quo. But what does it mean to have an indirect field of reciprocity? Which is where you start to say, look, imagine, I actually have this beautiful photo of a bunch of young kids, and I love it. It's like they're all sitting in a circle, giving a shoulder rub to the person in front of them. So you do something for someone in front of you, and you don't get anything back, but that person does it for the person in front of them, and what goes around comes around. What you get in return for engaging in that way is a circle, and that's a lot more resilient. And so this indirect reciprocity is what relationships open you to. And then there is a third kind of reciprocity where it's an infinite reciprocity, right? Where you'll plant seeds for trees whose harvest you will never be there to collect. And who do you have to be to plant those seeds in that way without needing any sort of validation in return? And there are these profoundly virtuous people who live in that way, who operate in that way. And so maybe we just take a moment of reflection here. to think about these kinds of reciprocities and say, hey, if I had to ask you, maybe all of you can go to your chat, and I think that would be a fun little experiment to do. So if you had to reflect, right, in the last week, which form of reciprocity have you offered to others the most? Has it been direct, transactional, indirect, or infinite? You can just type it in the chat box and I'll share a bunch of these. And direct is something we all experience like at a coffee shop, right? Indirect is something we all experience at a family. Infinite is something we all kind of do when we're maybe gardening. All three. Interesting. Wow, so many responses. Oh, it's amazing. I wish I could speed read that fast. Maybe one of the hosts could give us the center of gravity, but I see lots of indirects in there. Some people are saying it's kind of in between indirect and infinite. That's beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I think you'll still have a couple of seconds here more to share. But what I want to reflect on, building on this, is if you had to ask me, what are sort of the core design principles that you have learned along this 25-year journey, spanning the direct, indirect, and the infinite? I mean, I think all three of them are useful in different contexts, right? But what have you learned as you have worked with that larger spectrum, not just transactional spectrum? And I would say it starts with this idea that if we can lead with relationships, we arrive at the first principle that everyone is good at something. I love this Mother Teresa anecdote. She was actually she was receiving, a big funder had come to see her work, and he was very happy, and they came with an entourage, and at the end they said, we want to take a photo. They take a photo with Mother Teresa, and Mother Teresa looks at them and she says, sure, no problem. They take a photo, but then the photo didn't come out great, I guess. So then they said, hey, Mother Teresa, can you move a little to the right? And so Mother Teresa moves a little to the right, and they took the photo and they were like, it's still not quite right. Can you move your face back a little? So Mother Teresa moves her face back, and they said, it's still not quite right. And then at this point, the photographer comes and starts to move her head exactly the way they wanted it. And one of my friends was actually in that room, and she was a huge fan of Mother Teresa. And she says, my goodness, she was livid. She's like furious. She says, how can you treat Mother Teresa like this? Right? But she noticed that Mother Teresa wasn't saying anything. And so she didn't respond in that moment. But after they left, she says, Mother, how could you not do anything? How could you just let them get away with that, And Mother Teresa said one sentence that actually ended up changing the arc of my friend's life. She says, my dear, there are many forms of poverty. And I think what Mother Teresa points us to is really this notion that there are multiple forms of dis-ease, of disconnection. And the converse is also true, that there are multiple forms of health. There are multiple ways to reconnect, to find ourselves in a deeper equilibrium. And I think how do we start to go there, right? How do we start to touch that possibility? This is my friend Firoz. I'm going to tell you a bunch of stories because I love stories. So here's Firoz. Firoz had on the right of your screen, that would be Firoz. Firoz had a storybook life. At the age of 36, he had 5,000 people under him in his department at SAP, managing the research and development R&D department. And then he had a son, and his son was severely autistic. That's the cutie on the left that you see. His name is Vivan. He's now 14, actually. But what Firoz decided to do is really lean into this idea. He was deeply related to his son, and he says, well, everyone is good at something. What is my son good at? And he realized that everyone was looking at his son's deficits, but what he found were his assets. And he says, wow, people on certain bands of the autism spectrum, never lie, they never steal, they never, they never are late, and he went down the whole uh, list of these traits, these character traits. And he says, wow, like, how can I use them in my workplace? And so he actually hired 5 people, became a Harvard case study. And then the CEO of SAP comes and says, I want 1% of our entire staff to be on the autism spectrum. And it all started with Virose looking at his son and saying, well, everyone is good at something. What is he good at? And how then do we incorporate that into the possibilities that we engage? And so here's another question for all of us, right? Like, we're often used to saying, well, I want to give my gifts to the world, but we often benchmark them with financial terms. But what are these multiple forms of regenerating our health, right? What are these multiple gifts that we're capable of circulating in the world? And that ends up being, it could be community. It could even just be attention, just the simple act of listening. It could be our time, just doing things. It could be our compassion, 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. And I think when we do that, when we tap into these gifts, we start to see there's a lot of research around what happens when we're in that state of appreciation versus when we are frustrated, right? Like, here is your heart rate variability. This is what's happening inside of you when we are frustrated. It's completely incoherent. I mean, this is how our body experiences a lot of negativity. But if we are in a state of appreciation, this is what it feels like for the body. Feels like heaven, right? And so how do we start to really tap into this, not just for the benefit of other people, but also for our own benefit? And there are lots of fun experiments you can do with this once you really get into it. We were hosting a conference at UC Berkeley, Zellerbach Hall. We were part of hosting the conference, and we said, well, you're accepting Visa, MasterCard, Discover, but how about accepting multiple forms of wealth? How about accepting like creativity wealth and community wealth and kindness wealth? And like, you do 5 acts of kindness and you tell those stories, that counts as, you get a ticket that way. And so out of these 800 people, 300 were these untickets. And it was so inspiring when you see everyone coming in, not just as like, oh, we had extra tickets, we'll let you in, but actually everyone feeling like, hey, I did my 8 hours of silence, I wrote a reflection, and that's my contribution to the space here. Makes everyone into a co-creator. It's very powerful. And we actually got Obama to sign off on this, right? We should remember that capital isn't just financial, it's social, informational, experiential, spiritual, so much more. I mean, this is sort of the definition of holistic health in so many ways. So the second principle, if we tap into this idea that everyone has a gift, I think the second big insight is that everyone not just has a gift, but they want to circulate the gift. Everyone can be great at giving. As Dr. King says, everyone can be great because every single person can serve. Once we open up our idea of wealth into so much more than just material possibilities. This is my friend Raghu, who after polio, he lost his legs. He was living in in a very difficult situation in a community, a very marginalized community, in a slum community, what some would say. And in this place, he decided he didn't have very much in terms of material wealth, but he said, I want to give because I want to regenerate my heart. I want my heart health rather. And what he decided to do was something remarkable. He decided that because of his condition, he had something very unique. He would walk with his hands. And when you see somebody walking with their hands, like scooting, you don't fear them in some sense, and people didn't. And a lot of the women in the community who were in very difficult situations would come and share their heart with him. And so he kind of became a friend, but then he says, how do I give to them? What do I have to give? And so he would grow these tulsi plants. He would literally grow these plants and offer them these small, humble pots. And then the next time he visits them, he would sit and say, how are you doing? How is your plant doing? By the way, how is your heart doing? And all of a sudden, they felt connected. They had a story, and then they would sit there kind of like this, and they would do their prayers together, and they would just share the sacred time. And he would go on. And in a span of 2 years, I think he gave out something like 1,900 Tulsi plants. Tells you how difficult a situation that was in that community. But here was Raghu responding with a very different kind of possibility. So maybe we take another moment. So thinking of, acts of kindness, right? In the last week, and again, you can add this in the chat window itself. What has been an unexpected act of kindness you have received in the last week? So there are so many people that are constantly giving to us, but we often don't tune in. And when we don't tune into that on the outside, we sometimes forget to do those things for ourselves. Like maybe somebody just listened to you. Oh, I see some nice responses already. Humor, flowers, a tasty meal, invitation to a movie, flower hugs. That's great. Oh man, you guys can't see what I'm seeing here, but this would like make your day. It would have filled, oh, this is amazing. Forgiveness, a musical piece, cookies. Wow. A welcoming smile, prayers, interesting conversation, a discount on internet service. There it is. Wow. Well, keep them coming, man. This is totally fabulous. Hey, somebody said something nice to me. I like it. I appreciate that. Prayers and love, a surprising call. Yes, do keep them coming. This is fabulous. Certainly, you sharing itself is making the days of all the people on the back end who are reading this. You realize this is what humanity is. So the third thing, as we see that everyone has a gift that they want to circulate, I would say the third big idea is that if everyone's generosity gets engaged, a kind of ripple effect starts to emerge. Not an orchestrated ripple effect, but a ripple effect designed by nature, a murmuration. I don't know if you're familiar with a murmuration, but this is one example of a murmuration. You have thousands of starlings coming together on without any coordination, without any central, CEO leadership, without any HR department, just figuring out how to do these intricate, elaborate shapes. And what they tell us is that, yes, each starling is unique, but yes, each starling also can belong to a larger field. What they show us is that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That yes, that when we are related, we actually ignite something which is greater than one and one coming together to create two. 1 + 1 is greater than 2 because the plus sign has value. How we connect has incredible value. And when we don't do that, if my incoherence is meeting your incoherence, we kind of have this traffic jam. Now, if you're Indian like I am, like this may not even seem like a traffic jam, but yes, for the most part, if you go to India, you'll see a lot of these kinds of traffic jams where everyone is going in all kinds of different directions. And that is what we're seeing with climate change and inequality and trust and all these different conflicts going on around the world. How can we bring a kind of social coherence to that process? And there's a lot of science behind this. A heart's electromagnetic waves reaches 7 feet out. And you're just in coherence yourself, but that's actually helping other people up to 7 feet out. We neurologically register each other's heart rhythms. So it's like without any physical contact. This is interesting. Like if you look at if you have to climb an uphill, you have to go up a hill. If you're doing it solo, it's going to look very steep. But if you do it with a friend, the same situation, the same physical circumstance, the same eyes, and it doesn't seem as steep. And what we also see is that just as depression and smoking and quitting smoking, all of that spreads in networks. So does generosity and kindness and goodness, right? So we know that we are social creatures. We just need to get into a coherent pattern. So a pattern that elevates everyone. Um, and so just a couple of quick examples. If we had time, I would tell you stories, but one of our experiments was this idea called Karma Kitchen, where you walk into a restaurant, like any other restaurant, but here at the end of your meal, your check reads zero because someone before you has paid for you, and you are trusted to pay forward for people after you. And most people think, oh my God, that wouldn't work. Everyone is selfish. But if you create the right context, you would be amazed. I remember for like more than a year, we used to be the top rated restaurant across Yelp in Berkeley. And everyone, like, you just go in and there's just this collective vibe. No one is paying for themselves. And it's profound. And it's not limited. This was this was a restaurant in Vienna that did it for this whole last summer. This was a rickshaw driver. It's not even restaurants, right? A rickshaw driver in India saying, you sit in my rickshaw, no meter. You pay whatever you're moved to offer. Some give more, some give less, but more than that, there's a different kind of regeneration of the mind and the heart. Richard Whitaker doing this with a magazine. There's acupuncture clinics. There's so many examples of this around the world. So lastly, like if you follow those, right? If we lead with relationships, we get to this idea that everyone is good at something. When everyone has a gift, we realize that, wow, everyone wants to circulate those gifts. They can be great at giving. And when that generosity is engaged, this kind of murmuration, this collective intelligence emerges. And when that happens, then we can say that everyone is connected to everything. Right? If you look at just network science, I find this to be mind-blowing. In the times of TV, if you have 50 people in a room, the maximum number of connections you have is 50. In the times of the telephone networks, with 50 people, if everyone can connect one-to-one, you have 1,225. But now in an internet era, we're no longer in one-to-many, you're no longer in one-to-one, you're actually in a many-to-many network. And with just 50 people in a many-to-many network, right? How many connections are possible? 100 million trillion. This is just math. So another way to look at this is you go from centralized to decentralized to distributed. And how do we start to really look at life in that way? This is a farmer who is, he's a farmer in Japan. Now, when you go to his farm, he runs his farm in a very unique way. There's no fertilizers or pesticides, but he never even weeds. He never tills the soil. It's called do nothing farming, permaculture. And in his farm, when you take an apple, people would fly all over the world just to have one apple from his farm. Why? Because when you chop the apple in half and you leave it outside, or you take a slice and you leave it outside, it will oxidize and it'll go brown, right? His apples never went brown. And he's like, we're like, why not? Well, it has antioxidants. Why does it have antioxidants? Because he says, my apple doesn't come from a tree. My apple comes from a tree, but that tree is connected to the roots. Those roots are connected to the roots of the entire field, including the weeds. And that is what makes it remarkable. That is understanding that everyone is connected to everything, and it gives us these remarkable antioxidants to be resilient, to be much more than our confusions, and to be connected. This is a quote by Bruno Barnhart, which I love. He says, "We humans prefer a manageable complexity to an unmanageable simplicity." I think what the Japanese farmer teaches us is to lean into this unmanageable simplicity. And that's possible if we go through all of those different processes. And ultimately, I think when we do, we arrive, the destination is joy. If we are going to look at our body health, our mind health, and our heart health, and if those start to regenerate amongst each other, I think we'll start to develop a jeweler's eye. And the more we engage with that, after sufficient regeneration, we can and will, I think, get to joy. That's the ultimate destination of this. And so in conclusion, if you find yourself disconnected, here are a few daily habits to try to reconnect. Be generous with your gifts. We all have gifts to give, and we all want to circulate them. Practicing mindfulness and gratitude is actually a tremendous sort of release in a way, because it allows you to align with nature's design. Lets you tap into the murmuration in a much deeper way, and pursue what makes you come alive. Howard Thurman, this incredible African American preacher, would say, go out and do what makes you come alive, because what the world needs most are people who have come alive. And so if we come alive in that way, there is no way we can stay in an island. It will naturally be related. And I think that ends up being quite powerful. And lastly, I would say, lean into the wisdom of the body, move your body, go outside, do what you need to do, and I think my friend Martin Kalunga Banda, who at one point was the chief of staff in Zambia for the Zambian president, he said something beautiful. He had a mystical experience, and he says, every single pore of our body is alive. And actually, it is an antenna for the infinite. And so if we can learn to tune into that, I think we would arrive at, I would say, Bill Stewart's favorite quote from Dr. Venkataswamy. He says, as we grow in spiritual consciousness, we identify with all there is in the world. There can be no exploitation. It is ourselves we are helping. It is ourselves we are healing. Thank you so much.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Nipun, for that really moving presentation. So we're going to take a Q&A. So if you have a question for Nipun, just click on that Q&A button and put your questions in. We have about 10 minutes, so we'll try to take as many questions as we can. So we'll start that in a moment, but first, 2 announcements. So please look for the post-event email on Friday with the full slide deck and additional health resources included from ServiceSpace and also IHH. Nipun gave us some great starters for how to reconnect with self and the world around us. If you'd like to pursue that further, ServiceSpace is offering a 21-day news story challenge where you can join others to learn and build supportive community. And if you found this lecture beneficial, we also invite you to subscribe to our free monthly e-newsletter called Inside Healing, where each month you'll receive wellness tips and videos, updates on upcoming events, and information about our Sutter IHH Integrative Medicine Care Centers. So please use the Q&R code or link in the chat box to subscribe, and you can also follow us on social media to stay updated. So please submit your questions. I'm going to go ahead